On today's episode, we're going to dive in and talk a little bit more about blood sugar regulation, why this plays a massive role in our wellness, and how we need to be paying attention to this probably more than ever during the holiday season. So, here's the thing to understand about blood sugar. When we get into blood sugar spikes and swings, it can cause inflammation and all kinds of other symptoms in the body. Things like mood swings, things like fatigue, hormone disruption, food cravings, weight gain, adrenal fatigue, sleep disturbances, and so much more. And one of the things that I like to teach about inside of my wellness programs and as a coach is the importance of understanding how we need to be nurturing the foundations of wellness. Understanding blood sugar regulation and how that plays a role in the foundations of health really matters for our longevity health, for our hormone health, for optimizing hormones, and so much more. And so I want to talk about this concept of blood sugar regulation and the habits and the things we can lean on in order to really nurture this, because it really can lead to so many symptoms that we experience. I know in my own journey, one of the things that I've had to uncover is the reality of how I've had to tweak habits and I've had to tweak my lifestyle in order to really serve my evolving health and my longevity health well. And one of the things that I feel like sometimes is the hardest inside of the wellness space, specifically when it comes to women's health, is this idea of how so much is marketed to us as the quick fix. Just take this supplement. All you need is this one specific program and you'll be good to go. And I'm here to tell you that unfortunately, that's just not the reality of nurturing our bio-individual health. I see it time and time again with the clients that I work with and the women that I speak with. And I've also personally experienced this. And so I want to be the person and the trainer and the coach that always continues to talk about the foundations of wellness, why this matters, and why those things play into something like blood sugar dysregulation, and why we need to be mindful of this concept. It's so important. And one of the biggest things inside of women's health is we have to be paying attention to all of these different facets in order to really take care of our wellness well. So let's talk about this. During the holiday season, why is a topic like blood sugar regulation important to think about? Well, oftentimes stress plays a huge role in blood sugar dysregulation. And the holidays oftentimes are a stressful time. We have more we're managing, we have more we're trying to figure out, we have more that we're working through, we have more obligations, we have more events, we might not be on our schedule like we typically are, maybe more indulgences, maybe there's more things that we're consuming in some way. And so it's just so important to understand how this is a huge piece to how we feel. And we have to be paying attention to what are the habits or things we can lean on in order to really support ourselves well from the inside out in this season. So number one, what's the first habit or the thing that we can work through or focus on when it comes to blood sugar regulation and helping ourselves feel good, have energy, and sustain that energy throughout the day? The first is how we start the day. And that is going to start for me with hydration. And this is something that I talk about with my clients all the time. This is something I've started to implement over the past handful of years in my own life. And it's so incredibly important. After we've been sleeping, and we wake up for the day, we're dehydrated, we're fasted. And one of the best and most beneficial things we can do for our physiology is dive into hydration first. So that's water, that's electrolytes, that's water with salt and lemon added to it, something that helps your body start to hydrate and get into hydrating specifically on that cellular level. So electrolytes are something that I love, and I love to introduce my clients to this because starting the day with that hormone supportive specific outlet rather than diving into caffeine or diving into sugar right away and essentially spiking cortisol or spiking blood sugar or adding stress, we are instead really supporting our physiology very intentionally. So some of my favorite electrolytes are the Hydrate and Detox from Hue and Grace, which I will make sure are linked in the show notes of this podcast, and Just Ingredients electrolytes as well. The Hydrate and Detox from Hue and Grace is a phenomenal product, not only because it has electrolytes, but it also has pre and probiotics in it. It also has L-glutathione in it, which is a powerful antioxidant and really powerful for inflammation. And overall, it's hormone supportive because there's no caffeine or sugar inside of that product. So it's incredibly powerful, not only from hydration, but from a lot of other benefits as well. And then the electrolytes from Just Ingredients are phenomenal because they're potassium forward versus sodium forward, which can be really beneficial from an overall mineral balance standpoint inside the body. And they have a phenomenal array of flavors. So a lot of different great flavors. And I'll make sure that everything is linked in the show notes so you can kind of research those two electrolytes. If electrolytes are not something that you want to dive into yet, you can still start the day with just water and some Himalayan salt and lemon. That is a great way to start the day and to really focus on hydrating your body and getting that water and hydration into your body at a cellular level. So it's so incredibly important because so many of us walk around dehydrated. And instead of really diving into hydration and water, we're diving into caffeine and sugar and things that aren't really helping ourselves sustain that natural energy. So that is a huge one, how we start the day, starting with hydration. Number 2 is starting the day with a really fulfilling, robust breakfast. So 25 to 30 grams of protein or more, really focusing on adding in fiber and fats, really focusing on how can I really build a robust plate that's going to help me feel energized and sustain my energy throughout the day. That is huge for overall hormone supportive habits, but it's also huge for blood sugar regulation. When we start the day with just caffeine or sugar forward, or we don't even add fuel in at all, we are essentially putting ourselves into a stressful state or a blood sugar spiked state. And that puts our blood sugar on roller coasters. It puts our cortisol on roller coasters, and it essentially is not hormone supportive or allowing our body to sustain energy throughout the day. So we want to essentially do things or lean into habits that are going to help ourselves stay in this steady state of energy rather than spike and crash, spike and crash. That's so incredibly important to be mindful of. So those are the first 2 things. The third thing is really getting moving after meals. And this is something that I've slowly started to implement more. It's incredibly powerful. The Glucose Goddess talks about this in her book. And I really believe that it makes a massive difference because I've seen the benefits, and I can't encourage you enough to think about this, because moving after meals not only helps with minimizing blood sugar spikes, but it also helps with overall digestion. So the goal is to walk for 5, 10, 15 minutes after a meal. Even if you're not going out for a steady state walk, try to move around your house, lean into more chores, do some laundry, head around it and clean up, whatever it might be. That's some of the things that I lean into from time to time after meals, specifically dinner time. After dinner's over, that's when I try to clean up the house, or I'm walking around and picking things up and moving around as much as I can rather than going straight to the couch. And this can be huge for overall energy, how we feel, and really leaning into habits that are essentially help minimize the blood sugar spike and help sustain our energy. So that's a great third one. The fourth is stress reduction. And this is big. The biggest thing to understand when we think about overall hormone health, and we talk about things like the concept of the 4-legged chair, which I've spoken about in other podcast episodes. And this is something that I've learned from one of my mentors. When we're thinking about blood sugar, that also is interconnected to our cortisol or our stress. It's also interrelated to or connected to our thyroid and our sex hormones. Our endocrine system is wildly interconnected. So when we think about stress reduction, that is going to essentially help also making sure that we're sticking to regulating our blood sugar. High cortisol tells our body to essentially make more glucose. It spikes more blood sugar. And so that will lead us into roller coasters and just get us into a place of not feeling that great or getting into those blood sugar spikes, etc. So it's so important to figure out, how can I manage my chronic stress, especially during the holiday season? Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's going for walks, deep breathing, finding some sense of joy, leaning into a creative outlet, doing something to make sure that you're managing your stress and winding down very intentionally. That is so incredibly important. And there's a variety of ways that we can lean into that. And it's something to be mindful of, especially when it comes to things like regulating blood sugar. The last one here is lifting weights, and movement of any kind are going to be important, but lifting weights is so huge because skeletal muscle plays a huge role in glucose and insulin health. And so we want to make sure that we're lifting weights, we're building muscle, we're utilizing that glucose that we're consuming, and because that will play an overall role in our metabolic health and our longevity wellness and how good we feel throughout our days when it comes to sustained energy. And so I want to make sure that I'm always speaking about not only movement after meals and making sure that we're moving in some capacity throughout the day, but lifting weights, especially for females, is so incredibly important. Not only in midlife health, but in all areas of our health. It's just such a huge piece to our overall wellness, but also for things like helping regulate blood sugar and really making sure that we're utilizing the fuel that we are consuming in a very intentional way that helps us sustain that energy. And so those are the 5 key things in relation to how do we really make sure that we're not getting into these really high highs and really low lows related to blood sugar throughout the holiday season. And I'll recap them really quickly. The first is hydration, making sure we're diving into water first. The second is protein forward fuel from the beginning of the day. So we're setting ourselves up for sustained energy. The third is making sure that we're moving after meals, trying to minimize that blood sugar spike by moving 5, 10, 15 minutes after meals. And it also helps with digestion when we do that. Number 4 is really focusing on stress reduction. When our stress goes up, our blood sugar can go up because, again, our endocrine system is wildly interconnected. And so we have to be working on managing our stress, especially during the holidays when there's more going on. We have more that we're managing and we're out of our norm. Maybe you're also at parties consuming things you're not normally consuming alcohol, whatever it might be. All of those things add more stress to the body. And so learning how to stress reduce is huge. And then number 5 is making sure that we're lifting weights, making sure that we're building skeletal muscle, nurturing our skeletal muscle, and helping ourselves utilize the glucose and the fuel that we are consuming in a very intentional way. That is huge for overall metabolic health and how we feel from an energy standpoint. I typically suggest that my clients lift about 3 to 4 days a week. I also very strategically personalize plans alongside my clients' physiology so they are maximizing their energy alongside their unique bio-individual health. And that also really helps them figure out, how do I get into this place of sustaining energy over time? And that's really the goal. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because the holiday season is incredibly stressful. Blood sugar dysregulation can be a huge driver for symptoms, low energy, fatigue, inflammation, and so much more. And if we can get into this place of not only learning how to utilize strategic plans alongside our physiology, we can also learn how to actually fuel well in order to sustain our energy day after day. And that's really the goal. Throughout this season, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I'm focused on is making sure that I have energy, making sure that I can still show up for my family, making sure that I can still show up for my obligations in my work and in the things that I'm doing inside the community. I want to make sure that I feel joyful and that I'm present and mindful of what's happening in the season. And when you don't feel great, it's so much harder to get into that headspace. And so that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this topic today, because so often, especially during the holiday season, when we're not managing stress, when we're getting further into blood sugar dysregulation, when we're not hydrating well, when we're not eating and fueling consistently, that not only adds a lot of stress to our bodies, but it also starts to compromise our immune system. And when that happens, we can get sick. And when we get sick, we miss events, we miss holidays, we don't get to intentionally enjoy things quite as well. So I wanted to talk about this topic because this is huge for overall wellness. And it's one of the foundations that we have to be paying attention to, especially inside a stressful season like November and December. So I hope and pray that this episode served you today. As always, go to the show notes for all the links to any products and things that I recommend to my clients and that I utilize in my day-to-day life. I pray that you take the tips, tricks, tools, and apply them into your lifestyle in order to really help yourself feel great and energized throughout this holiday.